$900 a month. Not for rent, not for a mortgage. Just to park the home you already own on a piece of land you'll never get to keep. And if you don't like it, you can always move. Except moving costs between $5,000 and $10,000, which is more than most of these homes are even worth. So you stay. And they know you'll stay. That's the whole business model. Here's what this video is actually about. Housing costs in this country are genuinely broken, and everyone has a villain picked out. You've probably heard the one about Wall Street firms buying up all the homes. It's a clean story, easy to follow, and it's almost entirely wrong, at least in the way it's usually told. Because the real story is messier, more specific, and honestly, a lot more disturbing. By the end of this, you're going to understand exactly what's actually driving your housing costs up, who's behind it, and the one piece of this that almost nobody is talking about, which I'll get to near the end, and it's the thing that should make you the most angry. Let's start with the villain that doesn't quite fit. Institutional holdings of single-family homes sit at about 0.35% of the total housing stock, and institutional investors account for only about 3% of single-family rentals nationally. That's not a typo. A firm like Blackstone holds about 0.06% of single-family homes. And it gets stranger. Institutional purchases of single-family homes are down over 90% since 2022. They were already leaving. Institutional investors have actually been selling more homes than they buy, and have been for 6 consecutive quarters. So here's the curveball. Despite all the headlines about Wall Street landlords, the market remains overwhelmingly controlled by small investors. Owners of just 1 to 5 properties account for 87% of all investor-owned homes. The villain everyone keeps pointing at is retreating, and prices are still going up, which means something else is doing the damage. And then, right in the middle of all this, on January 20th, 2026, President Trump signed an executive order to prevent large institutional buyers from purchasing single-family homes, timed almost perfectly, right after the data showed those same buyers had already pulled back by 90%. It's a little like passing a law against something that had mostly stopped happening on its own. The cameras loved it. The math didn't. So if Wall Street isn't the main driver of your housing costs, what is? This is where it gets specific. There is a federal antitrust case, a real one, with named defendants, named software, and a named mechanism that explains part of how rents got pushed so high, so fast. In August 2024, the Justice Department, together with the Attorneys General of 8 states, filed a civil antitrust lawsuit against RealPage Inc. for an alleged unlawful scheme to decrease competition among landlords in apartment pricing. And then the DOJ expanded that case. The lawsuit eventually named 6 large landlords, including firms managing over 1 million rental units across dozens of states, alleging they coordinated pricing using the same software. Here's how it actually worked. RealPage software provides daily pricing recommendations to help landlords price their available apartments. The landlords don't have to follow the suggestions, but because the software has access to a vast trove of confidential data, critics argue it helps clients charge the highest possible rent. But it went further than that. Landlords allegedly used direct communication between property managers, they called them market surveys and call-arounds, sharing confidential pricing data, and then discussing how to modify the software's recommendations in user group meetings hosted by RealPage itself. That's not just an algorithm, that's a cartel with a tech interface. RealPage was replacing competition with coordination, and renters paid the price, said DOJ Antitrust Chief Gail Slater. The DOJ eventually reached a settlement with RealPage in November 2025. RealPage did not have to pay damages or admit any wrongdoing. Under the settlement, RealPage can no longer use real-time data to determine price recommendations. The only non-public data allowed must be at least 1 year old. The landlord case is still ongoing. 10 states are continuing to pursue their own antitrust claims. So that's the apartment market. But there's a corner of the housing market where the situation is even more extreme, and most people have never thought about it. And this is the one I promised you at the start. Mobile home parks. Manufactured housing communities. Whatever you want to call them, They represent the last genuinely affordable housing option for about 22 million Americans. You own the home, you rent the land, and that distinction, owning the structure but not the ground, is where the trap is set. When a private equity firm buys one of these parks, the residents can't just leave. Moving a manufactured home costs between $5,000 and $10,000. And here's the part that should make your jaw drop. Researchers have estimated that for every $100 increase in lot rent, a manufactured home loses roughly $10,000 in value. So the longer you stay and absorb the rent increases, the less your home is worth, and the less you can afford to leave. It's a self-tightening trap. Frank Rolfe is one of the largest mobile home park owners in the country and co-runs a training program for park investors. He said the quiet part out loud in a recorded interview. One of the big drivers to making money is the ability to increase the rent. If we didn't have them hostage, if they weren't stuck in those homes in the mobile home lots, it would be a whole different picture. That's not an accusation from an advocate. That's an industry figure explaining his own business model. On the record, using the word hostage. Almost half, 47%, of private equity-owned parks identified in one tracker were financed by Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac. Those are the government-backed mortgage entities whose stated mission is to expand affordable housing. What's ironic about it is that one of the missions of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac is to help preserve affordable housing, said George McCarthy of the Lincoln Institute of Land Policy. And they're doing exactly the opposite by helping investors come in and make the most affordable housing in the United States less affordable all the time. Perversely, a company spiking rent in one set of parks actually improves its chances of getting more government-backed loans, since it boosts cash flow. So the more aggressively you raise rents, the better your loan terms for the next acquisition. Taxpayer-backed institutions are underwriting the same firms that residents say are squeezing them out. And what happens right after a park changes hands? One study of Florida manufactured housing communities found that in the months following a park sale, eviction filings increased by 40%. Not eventually, not over years. In the months right after. The business model isn't just rent increases, it's that the threat of eviction, for people who can't afford to move and can't sell their homes at a fair price, is itself a tool. Now here's the thing I said I'd come back to. The one that almost nobody has connected to the housing conversation yet. The Supreme Court ruled in 2024 that cities are no longer prohibited from punishing people experiencing homelessness for camping in public, even if they have nowhere else to go. Justice Sotomayor's dissent put it plainly. Sleep is a biological necessity, not a crime. And then, in the aftermath of that ruling, Kentucky passed a law, the Safer Kentucky Act, that makes repeated camping on certain private or public property a misdemeanor. The legislature overrode a governor's veto to pass it. And the law allows property owners to use deadly force against people who are illegally camping on their land. Think about that chain. Rents go up through coordinated pricing software. Mobile home park residents get priced out by investors using government-backed loans. Evictions spike the month after a sale. Homelessness increases. And then a Supreme Court ruling and a state law together create a legal framework where the final destination of that chain, sleeping outside, is punishable by law, and in at least one state, potentially by lethal force. This isn't one story, it's one system. If you want to understand how all of this actually connects, the algorithmic rent coordination, the manufactured housing trap, the Fannie and Freddie financing loop, and what you can actually do about it as a renter, a buyer, or just someone paying attention, I put together a full breakdown guide as a downloadable PDF. It walks through each mechanism, what's been proven versus what's still alleged, and a checklist for how to evaluate your own housing situation against these risks. The link is below this video. Here's where we started. $900 a month, just for the land. And the assumption that if you could just stop the big Wall Street firms, the problem would go away. What we actually found is that the biggest institutional players are already leaving, while prices stay high, because the mechanisms doing the damage are more structural, more legal, and more bipartisan than a simple villain story allows. Algorithmic coordination between landlords. a manufactured housing market built on immobility, government-backed loans financing the squeeze, and a legal system increasingly hostile to the people at the bottom of it. The math doesn't add up because we've been doing the math on the wrong numbers. Now you have the right ones.